Two teenage girls walked into a luxury car dealership wearing combat pants and plain blue t-shirts. They approached a high-end car, asking a few questions. The salesman looked them up and down with disdain. "I think you're in the wrong place," he sneered. "These cars start at $500,000. Laughter echoed from the staff and a few nearby customers. Humiliated, the girls quietly left. The next morning, two Rolls-Royce Boat Tails pulled up outside the dealership. As the back door opened, the same girls stepped out, followed by their father in a tailored suit. The salesman watched, stunned. He never saw it coming. It was a normal day for the showroom until two teenage girls appeared at the entrance. Their arrival was almost silent, the only sound being the soft squeak of bike tires as they coasted into view. The sun glinted off the large glass doors of the dealership, reflecting the polished marble floors and shimmering cars inside. The girls were a stark contrast to the opulence around them, dressed in combat pants, plain blue t-shirts, and sneakers that had seen better days. They had no flashy accessories, no designer handbags, or expensive jewelry to announce their arrival. What they carried with them was rarer, dreams untouched by cynicism. The glass doors parted with a gentle whoosh as they stepped inside. The air was cool, filled with a subtle scent of leather, rubber, and expensive cologne. Rows of luxury vehicles stretched out before them. Sleek hypercars with curving fenders and gleaming badges. SUVs built like tanks but refined like jewelry, and sedans whose paint jobs reflected the light like water. The girls' faces lit up immediately. They didn't bolt around like some kids might. They didn't yell or shriek. They simply stood there, soaking it all in with wide eyes. One of the girls leaned in toward her sister and whispered, "That's it. That's the one." Her finger pointed to a midnight blue hypercar parked under a special spotlight. The car seemed to glow from within, its sleek body lines and aggressive stance making it look like a caged beast waiting to be unleashed. It was a model so exclusive that even most millionaires could only dream of owning it. As they cautiously moved closer, admiring the gleaming curves and carbon fiber accents, a cold voice interrupted their moment. "Can I help you?" The girls turned as a salesman approached. He was tall with slicked-back hair, a sharp navy suit, and shoes polished enough to see your reflection. Everything about him screamed status, except the sneer on his face, which screamed something else entirely. He let his eyes rake over their outfits. No Gucci, no Balenciaga, no Rolex glinting on their wrists, just cheap sneakers, combat pants, and t-shirts. His mouth curled into a condescending smile. "I'm sorry," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, "but I think you're in the wrong place." The older girl tried to explain. "We were just wondering about these vehicles." The salesman cut her off. "These cars start at $500,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." Behind him, a couple of staff members snickered. A customer nearby threw them a pitiful glance, shaking his head as if to say, "Kids these days." The younger girl stared at the floor, her sneakers scuffing against the polished marble. The older girl mustered a polite nod. "Sorry to bother you," she said softly. They turned and left, the glass doors whispering shut behind them. For a moment, it felt like the world had snapped shut too. Another dream quietly crushed under the weight of arrogance. Outside, the girls walked toward their bikes, moving slower now, weighed down by embarrassment. They had just wanted to see the cars, to dream. Was that so wrong? But just as they were about to pedal away, a voice called out, "Wait." They turned to see a woman jogging toward them. She wore a cream blouse and black slacks, and her hair was tied back in a neat ponytail. Her face held no sneer, no judgment, only warmth and sincerity. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, slightly breathless. The girls hesitated, then nodded. The woman led them back to the midnight blue hypercar. Her approach was entirely different. No sales pitch, no agenda, just genuine excitement to share something beautiful with someone who could appreciate it. "I heard you asking about this model," she said, crouching a little to meet their eyes. "It's a remarkable machine. Let me show you why." And so she did. She talked about the craftsmanship that went into hand-stitching the leather seats, the engineering marvels under the hood, the decades of innovation that made this hypercar what it was today. She showed them how the interior tech worked, explained aerodynamics in a way they could understand, and answered every single question with patience and enthusiasm. The girls listened, fascinated. They didn't ask about how fast it could go from 0 to 60. They didn't ask about the price tag. They asked about the carbon fiber weave, about the suspension tuning, about how the airflow worked over the body to keep it stable at high speeds. Most adults never ask questions like that, but they did. At one point, the woman smiled and said, "Do you want to sit in it?" Their jaws dropped. "Seriously?" the younger one gasped. She nodded with utmost care. The girls climbed into the car one by one, handling everything delicately like it was sacred. No wild selfies, no giggling, just pure appreciation. When they climbed out, the woman handed them her business card. "If you ever have more questions," she said with a smile, "you can call me directly. You're always welcome here." The girls beamed at her sincerely and rode away, this time with their heads held a little higher. Inside the dealership, normal life resumed. The smug salesman from earlier leaned toward a coworker and muttered, "Wasting her time." She heard him but just smiled to herself. Some things were more important than closing a sale. The girls pushed open the front door, their sneakers thudding softly against the polished wooden floors. Home! The sun had begun its lazy descent beyond the horizon, spilling long golden rays through the windows of their modest but beautiful house. Warm, comfortable, filled with books and memories. Their home was a place where dreams were nurtured, not judged. But today, something felt different. Normally, the house would come alive with chatter as soon as the girls stepped inside. Excited voices recounting their day's adventures, bursts of laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Today, there was only silence. They dropped their backpacks near the door and drifted into the large sunlit kitchen, where their father sat reading at the island counter, a glass of water beside him. The kitchen smelled faintly of fresh lemon and herbs, remnants of a day filled with life. He looked up immediately, sensing something was wrong even before they said a word. Their father was a man of calm strength, the kind of presence that filled a room without ever needing to raise his voice. His dark hair was peppered with silver at the temples, and his eyes, deep, steady, patient, missed nothing. He closed his book slowly, set it aside, and gave them his full attention. "What happened?" he asked simply. The girls hesitated. The older one looked at her younger sister, urging her silently to speak. With a sigh, the younger girl sat down at the island. Her sister followed. There, under the soft glow of the pendant lights, the story poured out. They spoke in fits and starts, at first their voices small and faltering, but once they began, the hurt behind their words gathered strength. They described the luxury car dealership, the gleaming glass, the shining cars that had made their hearts soar. They described how they had admired a beautiful midnight blue hypercar, whispering dreams to each other under the bright showroom lights. And then they described the salesman, his sneer, his words dripping with mockery, the laughter of the others, how small they had felt, how quickly the excitement had crumbled into humiliation. The girls' voices shook slightly as they recalled it, but they pressed on because it wasn't the cruelty they wanted to end the story with. They told him about her, the woman who had seen past their scuffed sneakers and plain t-shirts, how she had come to them not with pity but with respect, how she had crouched to speak to them at eye level, explaining the hypercar's engineering like they were equals, like they mattered, how she had let them sit inside the car, not because she thought it would lead to a sale, but because she understood the importance of wonder, of possibility. When they finished, their voices fell away into silence. The sun dipped lower, the last of its light turning the kitchen to molten gold. Their father sat very still, his face unreadable, a calm surface over deep waters. Then, without a word, he rose from his chair. He walked to each daughter and kissed her lightly on the forehead, his touch full of love and understanding. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The girls exchanged uncertain glances. Their father was a man who chose his battles carefully. When he moved with purpose. Tonight, it seemed he had decided to move. He scrolled through his contacts, found the number he wanted, and made the first call. His voice was low, steady. He didn't need to shout to command attention. The authority was there in the way he spoke, in the certainty, in the weight of every word. One call, then another, then a third. Deals were being made, arrangements set in motion quietly, efficiently, like a general planning a campaign. The girls watched wide-eyed but silent, sensing that something larger than they could fully understand was unfolding before them. When he was finished, their father set the phone down gently on the counter. He smiled at them, a small, reassuring smile. But behind his eyes, the storm was gathering. "Get some rest," he said, his voice warm but firm. "Tomorrow we have some business to take care of." The morning sun had barely climbed above the rooftops, casting a gentle golden haze over the city streets when the dealership doors swung open to another ordinary day. Inside, the world ticked along as usual. Salesmen in crisp suits adjusted their ties and rehearsed smiles in the mirrored walls. Baristas behind the dealership cafe frothed milk for cappuccinos. The low buzz of conversation drifted through the air like the hum of distant bees. Everything was just as it had been the day before, polished, rehearsed, comfortable. But outside, something extraordinary was stirring. At first, it was just a feeling, a tremor in the air, a shift in the atmosphere that made heads lift and conversations stumble into silence. Then came the sound. It wasn't loud. It wasn't brash. It was a soft, commanding rumble, refined, deep, and smooth like the first notes of a grand symphony warming up. Engines. But not just any engines. These were the unmistakable heartbeats of the world's rarest, most meticulously crafted cars. 2 Rolls-Royce Boat Tails glided into view, their bespoke paint jobs shimmering under the morning light, throwing back reflections like. And the kind of wealth that didn't shout, but whispered through legacy and craftsmanship. The dealership staff froze. Mid-motion, coffee cups were set down. Papers slipped from fingers. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Everyone turned to stare as the boat Tails rolled to a smooth stop just outside the glass doors, exuding an aura of silent, effortless dominance. For a moment, no one moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with the faintest click of a hidden mechanism, the back door of the first boat tail swung open, and out stepped the girls, but they were no longer the same simple teenagers who had wandered into the dealership the day before. Gone were the combat pants and plain blue t-shirts. In their place were flowing, perfectly tailored gowns, silk, and satin masterpieces that caught the sunlight with every delicate movement. Their hair was styled to frame faces, lit with the quiet confidence of those who knew exactly who they were. Their steps were measured, elegant, deliberate. They weren't trying to impress anyone. They were simply being, and that somehow made all the difference. Behind them, from the second boat tail, another figure emerged, their father. If the girls shimmered like royalty, he was the king, who needed no crown. He wore a sharply tailored, dark bespoke suit that looked as though it had been stitched by the hands of time itself. His shoes gleamed with understated elegance. On his wrist set a watch so rare that few would even recognize it, a quiet testament to old money and older power. He didn't walk quickly, he didn't need to. The space around him seemed to adjust itself to his pace, his presence bending the room's energy without effort. Inside the dealership, the silence was absolute. Every eye was glued to the unfolding scene. Customers and salespeople alike watched as if a scene from a movie had come to life before them. At the far end of the floor, the rude salesman, the one who had laughed at the girls and dismissed them without a second glance, stood, rooted in place, his face drained of color. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Like a slow, creeping horror. These were the same girls, the same ones he had mocked, the same ones he had turned away with sneers and condescension. Only now, they had returned, cloaked in undeniable, breathtaking power. And they weren't alone. The father cast a slow, sweeping glance over the dealership. Interior, the glass walls, the endless rows of polished cars, the bustling staff, who now stood frozen like statues. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Every movement, every breath he took carried a message louder than words could ever say. You judged wrong, and now you will see the price of your judgment. The girls walked ahead, their gowns flowing around them like water, every step a soft command of presence. They moved toward the same hypercar they had admired the day before, the deep midnight blue masterpiece that had first captured their dreams. The father followed slowly, hands in his pockets, radiating effortless authority. Finally, he stopped before the stunned crowd of staff. For a long, charged moment, no one spoke. Then he turned his gaze, finding the young female salesperson, the only one who had treated his daughters with dignity, who had answered their questions when everyone else laughed. She stood nervously near the front desk, clutching a tablet to her chest, her knuckles white, but she didn't look away. Their eyes met, and he smiled. Not a wide smile, not a salesman's grin, just a small, knowing curve of the lips, one that carried more gratitude than 1,000 words could express. Without breaking eye contact, he spoke. I believe, he said calmly, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. You were the only one here yesterday who saw my daughters for who they are. The young woman swallowed, nodding once, almost imperceptibly. I intend to reward that, he continued. Behind him, the rude salesman shifted awkwardly, opening his mouth to stammer an apology or excuse. But the father didn't even glance at him. He never needed to. His attention was fully on the young woman who had shown Kindness. I'd like to make a purchase. He said casually, as though ordering. Coffee. 5 cars. Your finest models. A gasp rippled through the dealership. Managers rushed forward, eager to intervene, to salvage something from the wreckage of their assumptions. But the father lifted one hand, a small, almost lazy motion that instantly silenced the scramble. With hair, he said simply, nodding toward the young woman. No one else. And just like that, the terms were set. There was no negotiating, no fast talking, no second chances. The young woman, still stunned, stepped forward. Together they spent the next hour, walking the showroom floor. He listened carefully to her recommendations, trusted her guidance, and with each choice he reaffirmed the lesson the entire dealership was now painfully learning. Kindness matters, character matters. Judging people by appearances, those had consequences. When the paperwork was finally signed, when the keys were ceremoniously handed over, the father turned to the young woman one last time. If you ever consider a career move, he said, handing her a card engraved with nothing but his name and a private number, call me. Her hand shook slightly as she accepted it, but her smile was radiant, blooming with pride and disbelief. As the family prepared to leave, the rude salesman caught the father's eye for just one desperate second. In that look, there was pleading, apology, panic. But the father merely offered a polite, detached nod, the kind reserved for those who had already been weighed, measured, and found wanting. The girls climbed back into the boat tails, their laughter like music as the engines purred back to life. Together, they glided away from the dealership, leaving behind only stunned silence and a legacy that would be whispered about in that glass palace for years to come. Because, on that day, they had all learned something powerful. The last customer had long since driven away, their brand new purchase gleaming under the dealership spotlights as it disappeared into the city night. Inside, the bright, bustling dealership was now a hollow shell of itself. Gone was the chatter of eager buyers, the click of polished shoes across marble floors, the slim murmurs of salesmen hunting commissions. Instead, there was only the low hum of the air conditioning and the soft clatter of keyboards as the last remnants of paperwork were closed out. The kind young woman, her name was Eliza, stood near the back elevator, a white envelope clutched tightly in her hand. She didn't open it. Yet, she didn't need to. She knew what it contained, a bonus check so large it still didn't feel real, a promotion that would change her life, and a handwritten note from the dealership owner himself. For your integrity, your heart, and your vision, thank you for reminding us who we are meant to be. The elevator doors dinged softly open, and she stepped inside, riding it up to the rooftop parking deck. The doors whispered shut. Behind her, the rooftop was quiet, deserted. A gentle evening breeze ruffled her hair as she walked toward the edge, her heels clicking softly on the concrete. The city stretched out before her, an endless tapestry of twinkling lights and moving stars. Somewhere in that glittering maze, the family she had helped today was driving away, their lives forever tied to hers by a moment of simple human kindness. She stood there, letting the weight of the day fall away, not the exhausting weight, the heavy kind that saps your spirit after being overlooked, belittled, judged. No, this was the light, thrilling weight of purpose, fulfilled. The bonus check in her hand wasn't what made her smile. It wasn't the extra zeros that made her chest swell with pride. It was the knowledge that kindness had triumphed, that treating someone with respect, even when the world encouraged you to size them up and toss them aside, still meant something. She had chosen compassion when it would have been easier to follow the crowd, and the universe had noticed. As she gazed out at the endless sprawl of the city skyline, her mind wandered back over the events of the day, the stunned faces, the whispered gasps, the triumphant glint in the eyes of the two young girls who had returned not just in power but in grace. Their dreams had been seen, their worth had been acknowledged, and in some small way, she had been part of that story. Below, Down on the showroom floor, a different scene was unfolding. The rude salesman Mark sat alone at his desk, hunched over a mountain of paperwork. The usual swagger was gone, the sharp glint in his eye, the superior smirk, all of it had evaporated into the sterile, cold fluorescence of the empty dealership. He picked up a pen and scrawled a note on a scrap of paper. Never underestimate the power of kindness. And with that, he folded the note, tucking it deep into a drawer he rarely opened. Outside, the family's boat Tails disappeared into the night, carrying with them a lesson etched forever in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed their return. Please like, subscribe and comment.